And there we go. And Gary, I allowed sharing screen to you now. So we're in like
Okay.
Finn. Welcome to the fun, Gary.
So let's see, help me out here as far as getting this share screen.
Yeah, down the bottom, pick the right monitor and you'll be all set, my friend.
There it is. So,
Perfect.
okay, now, all right, well, and let me switch to presentation mode here so that everybody can see
And I'll
where
watch
we're
for
going.
questions. And if any come up, I will let you know.
Okay. Yeah, and
Put them in the chat window.
Depending on how you want to, whether it's you can either hold them till the end or if it's something that is interesting and germane, we can pull it up right and I'll answer it right then and there. But anyway, well, I really appreciate the opportunity. Thanks very much for having me here. And this is one of 3 articles that I actually had, or presentations based on 3 articles that I had printed and published in Supply Chain Management Review. The first one was After the Dust Settles, which was published in 2020. The Roaring 2020s was then published in 2021, and we just published in late 2022 the third of what I'm calling my COVID trilogy, which is coming out of the darkness. And but we're talking here about 3 trends that will challenge supply chains in the coming decade. And to give you sort of a perspective, I've spent the last 42 years in supply chain, even, in it basically what is supply chain now. When I first came out, some of you guys may remember, we called it distribution. I started my career at JCPenney back in the early 80s and got into consulting. And then in 2004, took a job in New York City for the New York City Housing Authority. I was the director of supply chain operations for almost 10 years, and then moved to the MTA, where I was vice president of supply logistics. And then my last position there before I retired was chief of enterprise asset management and supply chain management for the MTA. But what we're going to be doing today is talking about 3 trends, and we're going to start. The agenda is going to look like this. We're going to start out with a little setting this tone by talking about the shape of things to come, and then jump right into the trends. Trend 1 is going to be is talking about the fact that the baby boom generation is retiring, and that's taking millions of people out of the workforce, and also, we'll soon and a lot of experience as well, and how that's going to affect the coming decade. Then we're going to talk about disruption and change during the decade and how that's going to affect supply chains. And then end with the third trend is the impact of climate change on how we're going to be able to manage supply chains in the future. And then we'll end up with some conclusions. So what I want to start out by talking about is that in the mid-1930s, H.G. Wells came out with a book called The Shape of Things to Come. And it was kind of interesting because it starts with a pandemic, it starts with and then a lot of upheaval and war and things like that, and then things start settling out as far as what the future is going to hold in in the far distant future. But pulling it back, we're talking about here that how and everybody knows this. This is not something that is gonna shock anybody, but COVID-19 has changed the world. We've changed the nature of work. You know, how many of you, as we were discussing earlier, are working from home now, or working from home a significant part of the time? How we meet has changed. Zoom didn't exist 5-10 years ago. You know, Microsoft Teams didn't exist 5-10 years ago. What's happened now is we met physically, and while there were some great and there are some great advantages to meeting face to face, we've learned to adapt, and we've learned to deal with the virtual world. We've seen but this has also changed how supply chains have worked, and we've seen this tremendous disruption in the past couple of years in supply chains that is just now starting to shake itself out, but not without some great costs. In fact, the New York Times calls it the great supply chain disruption. They name and all of these things that happened in 2020, 2021, and into 2022. It also sparked what we've been calling the Great Resignation, where above and beyond what normally has happened, you know, what's normally happening with people resigning and changing jobs, it's this huge bump of people that have decided for whatever reason to quit their job, maybe not, you know, maybe retire early, maybe move on, change careers entirely. We've seen, you know, and this has caused a tremendous amount of reskilling and upskilling in the economy as people change their careers or they go out and work for themselves. And in addition to this, that's the first thing you talk about. The second thing is that change is occurring at an ever increasing rate. We're seeing, because of concepts, products, and companies that are disrupting, you know, becoming disruptors and disrupting the economy. I mean, again, Uber, and you know, and companies like Amazon, you know, have changed, and Apple have changed the face of how we do business, and you know, and with their products and their concepts and their technologies. And finally, we're looking at the changes in the environment, and people are finally realizing that resources are in fact finite, and that the world's starting to really wake up to climate change and the realities of that, and that, you know, and running out of resources. So how supply chain professionals deal with this is going to be really a way of determining the future of whether we prosper or not in the next decade to come. Will people and organizations be able to bridge the knowledge gap as people leave the workforce? Will they be able to come to terms with continuous transformational change? And how are we going to deal with the climate crisis? So let's start with trend number one. Okay. The baby boom generation is now retiring. This is the group of 76 million people that were born between 1946 and 64. A number of you probably fall into this category. I was born in 1956. I'm right in the center of it, and I just retired. And what's happening is the people are reaching full retirement age and are aging out of the system. And with the last of these probably aging out in at the end of the decade. But they're taking their cumulative skills and knowledge and historical perspective that represent over 3 billion years of experience and leaving. And how is that huge hole in knowledge going to be filled? You know, you wake up one day and Bill's retired. Well, you know, maybe a lot of people didn't know what Bill did. Well, and 6 months later, you find out that all these reports that Bill was doing, nobody knows how to do. But he was the one that was responsible for these things, and it comes up more and more and more all the time this way. And boomers, you know, this whole generation, you know, they were the first people who really were witnessed multiple revolutions in technology. I found this is an interesting chart. Since the boomers started retiring in 2012 to 2019, for the first decade, on the average, about 2 million people, 2 million boomers a year were retiring. Then COVID hit in 2020, and you see that jump to 3.2 million because people decided, hey, I'm getting out of here. And, you know, and now what's happening in I don't have the numbers for 2021 and 2022, but the numbers I'm hearing is on the average, it's like 4 million people a year are retiring right now. And that's leaving a tremendous gap in the number of job openings and the number of open positions that are out there. And it's dry, you know, and those people, those skills are gone. And it's hard to fill those spots now, and seeing that happening over and over again. And I think that's going to continue, because we're seeing that there's a number of here's sort of a list of things that we've seen, concepts, hardware and technology discoveries that occurred since about 1960, about the time of you know, the boomer generation, et cetera. But we've seen concepts like auto ID, you know, which is your barcoding and your 2D barcoding and things like that. Equipment changes like containerization, you know, those containers that we see on ships now, those were invented in 1956. A guy named Malcolm McLean, who was head of who ran McLean Trucking back then. You know, this is where knowledge of history is worthwhile, even in supply chain. But he came up with the whole concept of TEUs, or 20-foot equivalent units, and could build, you know, actually, you know, the first container ships. Manufacturing resource planning, barcode scanning, warehouse management systems, pick-to-light systems, robots, big data, artificial intelligence. All of this stuff happened in the last 50 and 60 years. And it's and as if you look at it and you see the history of it, you see it started out slow and it picked up, you know, so that things are happening virtually every day now. And so one of the things that I want to talk about as far as a way to save some of this knowledge is by using what we call a knowledge transfer process. And this can be done manually. It can also be done using artificial intelligence and in using, you know, for information transfer. But by following this process of identifying information, collecting it, organizing it, sharing that information and knowledge, adapting it for new uses, and using it, and then creating a new knowledge base, we can actually take knowledge that is out there right now that we're in danger of losing and share it with the next generation down the road. Some other ways we can minimize the loss of institutional knowledge, which is what we're in fact doing now. And this is where that phrase reinventing the wheel came from, is because as we lose institutional knowledge, we have to reinvent the wheel. We use, again, knowledge transfer programs. You can use mentoring programs. I mean, the growth of mentoring programs over the past 10 years in companies has happened, has grown exponentially. I've been involved in that. I know ASCM, I've been an ASCM mentor for many years, and I'm sure a number of you are as well. Using structured exit interviews where we can actually talk to people and understand what did they do, how did they do it, and how they could transfer this information along. I've also seen situations where companies have kept people on for a period of time just to be able to put together what they did and how they did it, and being able to share that along the way. Unfortunately, a lot of companies are running short-sighted on this, in that in their hurry to make a buck and to hit the numbers on the quarterly basis, when people leave, they're gone. And then you find out later that, hey, we really needed that, what Bill did, we really needed him to have his input on this so we could, we could, follow up and do the reports that he did it, or do the analysis that he did or she did or whatever. Build a library of best practices in your organization, whether it's within your supply chain or in your particular area of expertise or within your company. And now the big thing, and this is coming on in the last 5-10 years, is leveraging artificial intelligence, being able to take practices that people did manually and make them electronic. The trend 2 falls into this along the way, but it's also a key thing, and this is we're seeing constant change and disruption, and it's happening more and more. And this is where it's happening such that people are having a hard time absorbing change. And I'll show you what I mean. It's because since the beginning of time, when you looked at the rate of change happened very, very slowly. In the last 10,000 years, we started out, slowly developed language and then developed alphabets and developed written forms, etc. But those changes happened in the development of government and concepts, etc., happened over generations and generations. So there were times when change didn't occur, from the time you were born to the time you die, you did the same thing as your parents did, or your grandparents, or your great-grandparents.
Yes.
And then,
Hey, Google,
Stop
music.
My account.
and then what happens is along the way, in the 15th century, I believe it was, we invented something called the printing press, or Gutenberg did. And from there, change started happening more and more rapidly. And so what happened is it went from a logarithmic rate of change to an exponential rate of change. so that today, I mean, things are happening just is new things are coming out literally every day, as far as new ideas, new concepts, new products, new companies, and things that are happening in such a way that they're the rate of disruption in the economy or in people's lives is incredible.
Hey, Gary, I'm thinking about, we talk about years, centuries past, how things moved along slowly, and word of mouth was basically the form of all forms of, and they were just starting to put things down in pencil and pen, and then like you said, the press. And as we move along, as we at the lightning speeds we see today, and as comparison, when I was, as yourself probably went way back when we had to use typewriters to do reports. Then we moved into finally got involved with was word smithing on computers, and it's the rate people. I don't know if kids understand. Young people understand how to take something and then putting it. It took such a long time to get anything done 20, 30 years ago. Now it's done at such a rapid rate of speed. And I say, well, what's the next thing? And I'm saying, your thoughts be downloaded into the computer or something like that, right?
Mhm.
And I think if we were to get that, and I mean, there's science fiction and all that, like the Matrix and all that other stuff that's out there, and it could very well go in that direction. Is there anybody out there that's seeing the negative insights of this being a negative thing? Like you say, we're moving so fast. Maybe we need to slow down. All right, I'll leave it at that.
Well, your point's well taken, Larry. The reason I talk about this is that we have it's literally happened that, and you can see this in everything today. And not to get political, but the rate of change in this country has put people at odds with each other. People can't absorb things fast enough. They used to be, the company you work for was a family, in especially in the post World War II generation, in the 50s and 60s and up until about the mid 70s. The companies you work for, your dad worked for, your mom worked for, whatever, were the companies that were treated you as family. And and it was and things happened. You went in and did the same thing, and as you had said, things were at a slower rate. Now things are happening so quickly, and it's even affected how quickly the markets work. And the market, everything is on a quarterly basis now. So, and if you don't beat last quarter, your stock goes through the floor, et cetera, et cetera. And whereas so it affects so what it affects is people get frustrated because they can't absorb change as fast as they used to. Because we're not computers. Computers do things very fast because they're programmed that way. While the human mind is one of the most fascinating computers in the world, and it's very sophisticated, it still takes you time to think about how to, what's 6 times 8? 48. Okay, what's 9 times 7? 63. Boom. But you still have to think about it. And then you go, okay, add 3 numbers in your head, and it slows down tremendously. So, but the thing is, computers do that, as a matter of rote. But anyway, so you're right on point there. But so here's some recent disruptors, and I think everybody's sees the concepts here. But these are the disruptive companies like Uber, Amazon, Tesla, Apple, the products, driverless cars, artificial intelligence. I mean, I've been reading articles lately about the artificial intelligence out there about this. The scary thing is some of this stuff, in conversing with a bot, they could actually tell you the wrong information. And so, that's, and those things can then affect decision-making processes, et cetera. But the thing is that you're talking about digitization, automation, et cetera. All of these things are happening faster and faster, and as we said, quicker than we can absorb them. Major disruptions. There's a McKinsey report that says, major disruptions that affect companies' bottom lines can occur on the average of every 3.7 years. And I think that this is going to not only increase, it's going to increase in both frequency and increase in the impact as new companies, concepts, and products continue to emerge. I think this 3.7 years is going to is probably going to go down, probably going to increase by 25 or 30% or more. It's going to get down to two years, 2.5 years. So that's going to be meaning supply chain disruptions are going to occur more and more frequently. There's going to be increased frequency of change. This is going to require an investment in labor, because people are going to will need to constantly, and this is the younger generation in everywhere, labor reskilling and upskilling their backgrounds, more freedom in choosing their work locations as they work from home, as they work remotely, et cetera, and more participation in decision making. They're going to have to do this, or people are going to, there's going to be, huge disruptions in the process. Technology, you're going to see more visibility within and across the supply chain as companies move to doing transformational processes, et cetera. You're going to see more and more visibility. You will have to. You're going to see that supply chain visibility across the organization. Here's some jobs that didn't exist. Let's see. Here's some jobs that didn't exist 10 years ago. Mobile app developers, drone engineers, and drone operators. Nobody knew what a drone was 10 years ago. And yet that's a big thing now. But bloggers, cloud architects, blockchain analysts, all of these things didn't exist 10 years ago. On the flip side of it, you're also going to, and these jobs require, technical upskilling and reskilling. On the flip side of it, here's some jobs that will not exist in another 10 years. Cashiers, receptionists. How many times have you called a company and you get a recording for a receptionist now? Virtually everything, virtually every company now, telemarketers, insurance underwriters, et cetera. Cashiers. One of the things that drive me crazy is going to the grocery store now. Now that I'm retired, I go to the grocery store a lot more with my wife than I used to. But I can't, using a cashier versus using myself, I would rather use a cashier, because if I'm going to check myself out, I need to be seeing a 10 or 12% savings on my groceries by doing that. You're not going to get me to do their job. My first job coming out of in high school was as a bagger and cashier at a grocery store, and to provide those services was worthwhile, and I thought added value to the whole process. And now that I'm on the other side of it, why should I check out my own groceries if I don't have to? I mean, I don't find it any faster. But the bottom line is, these jobs, are going the way of the dinosaur. And they don't require formal training and et cetera. So this is why upskilling your and making sure that you have the skills for the future is so important.
Might add, a lot of people buy things online, and it's the prices are cheaper.
Mhm.
And buying, if I just went today, I looked at buy a windshield wiper linkage power transmission assembly that I went down to AutoZone, and they're charging like $250. I go online, $70. It's like,
Yeah, there's a difference there, and there's also
that's a big problem. I'm
yeah,
gonna tell you right now.
but that and that's a disruptor. I mean, the whole thing being is that when you look at things from an e-commerce standpoint, the whole business model has changed. You don't have the shelves and the extra handling and all this kind of stuff. All of us as supply chain people know one thing, and that is, the more you touch something, the more it costs. And when you don't have to touch it in an e-commerce thing, you can, in an e-commerce environments, you don't have to, add the additional costs that you see out there. So, one of the books that I read a number of years ago, it's still out there, and it's still a worthwhile book, is a book called Leading Change by a guy named John Cotter. I believe is he an MIT professor? I'm trying to remember. It's either MIT or Harvard. Anyway, bottom line is, he said transformation efforts in companies fail on the average of, somewhere between 65 and 80% of the time. And the main reason for that is because they fail to recognize the human aspect of change. And so he came up with 8 reasons why. And so I'll list them here. One is not establishing a great enough sense of urgency in the organization. We're making this change, we need to make it now. Not creating a powerful enough guiding coalition. Lacking a vision. When company management doesn't have the vision and can't sell the vision to their organization, that's a guaranteed recipe for failure in a change effort. Under communicating the vision by a factor of 10. Communication is key to making change efforts within an organization. Not removing obstacles to the new vision. Not systematically planning for and creating short-term wins. If you don't celebrate and create those short-term wins, people are not going to see the progress that's happening. Declaring victory too soon is another key one. And also the probably the most important one, not anchoring the changes to the corporation's culture. If you don't make this, these changes part of the everyday business of your organization, then it's going to fail within a year. Now I'm going to make a comment here, and this is my comment of how to anchor change in an organization. by looking at, for example, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And everybody here probably is very familiar with this, going back to college days. But Maslow's needs started at the base with psychological and safety needs, food, clothing, and shelter, et cetera. Then it comes to the psychological needs of belongingness and esteem. And then finally, the self-fulfillment needs. What happens is when a company starts, comes out with a change of, we're going to change, we're going to reorganize, we're going to, do this or do that. And we've got these consultants coming in and they're going to make these changes. What happens to the rank and file in an organization? What do they immediately think of? They think of, am I going to have a job? Is this going to affect, how many hours I can put in? Will this affect my overtime? Will this affect my pay? And going back to, am I going to have a job? Bottom line, everything goes to the base, the basic needs. And what we need to be doing and is we need to be focusing on not letting people, sit there and go, what am I going to do? Will I have a job? But focus on the fact that we got to approach it so that it appeals to the higher level, so that you look at, these jobs and saying, we're not going to fire anybody. We're going to make these, situation where your environment is, your job will be easier. Your job will be more productive. Your job will help you do, will help you get things done better, faster, so that we can continue to grow as an organization. And that's the way we need to, be approaching change in organizations, not so that it threatens people, but so that it services, supports people. And one of the best stories is this actually happened to me was back in the 90s, late 90s. I was working for a consulting firm, and that consulting firm was working, was going to merge with another consulting firm. It's one of the, big six, big eight at that time. And what they did in order to keep people from worrying about their jobs, et cetera, was they actually had the president, the chief partners and the presidents, the managing directors of the organization actually had weekly phone, meetings where they would tell you exactly what was happening with these negotiations. And what it did was it killed any rumors that were out there. And they, and they would just tell you, they told you the absolute truth, and it helped people understand what was happening. And while at that time, and this went on for like 3 or 4 months, and while ultimately the merger did not go through, because they decided that, believe it or not, these two companies decided our cultures don't mix, so this is not going to work. And they backed off of it. And what it did, though, is it told me, because these managers and really communicated with people and told them and were honest with people, it was like, wow, this is an amazing organization. And it really brought the organization together, and you really saw, people working together and doing a better job. But I thought it was probably one of the best jobs of communication I'd ever seen in my working career. Ways to change behavior. This is a friend of mine, Dr. Natalie Hollinger, has come up with 4 ways of changing behavior in people and organizations, and how to deal with it. And that what is make the change relatable, work to align need to work to align the company, the team, and the individual goals. If you can't sell people on the idea that this change will benefit them as well as the company, and seeing how that all works together, you're never going to get an organization to buy into the change. Next thing is make it desirable, appeal to their sense of belonging and being part of the community. Make it contextual, focus on actions that can be immediately implemented. And finally, make it easy. Don't set yourself up to fail. Make sure that, you know, in other words, if your goal is to keep your work area clean, make sure that there's plenty of, not only plenty of trash cans around, but also they're emptied, very frequently, because if you don't, you're going to set yourself up to fail. Now let's talk about trend number 3, climate change. Bill Gates, and this comes from his book, How to Avoid a Climate Disaster, lists 3 things that we must overcome. And number 1, we've got to get to zero emissions by 2050. That means we've got to take from, we currently produce 51 gigatons of greenhouse gases annually. That needs to be reduced to 0. 2, we need to deploy the tools that we already have, like solar and wind, faster and smarter. 3, we have to create and roll out breakthrough technologies to take us the rest of the way. Now, interestingly enough, sources of greenhouse gases, and I didn't realize this, but making things like cement, steel, and plastic. Well, I knew, everybody understands plastic because that comes from oil, but I did not realize that manufacture of cement, because of the making of the actual taking limestone and basically you're cooking it, takes all the carbon out of it and releases that in the atmosphere. Steel the same way, you're creating a lot of greenhouse gases because of the making of steel. That's 31% of greenhouse gases emitted on an annual basis. Plugging in as far as electricity, growth, things like plants and animals, just turning soil. The annual plowing of fields releases greenhouse gases, and that's something we have to deal with. But getting around, planes, trains, cars, ships, etc., really only 16%. And then, of course, air conditioning, keeping us cool and warm, etc., down to 7%. But the idea here is that, I've been seeing a lot of things happening as far as low carbon or low greenhouse gases in making cement and steel, especially. Seeing that happen recently, and while it's right now it's a little more expensive, the idea is to make it cheaper. But also, I saw this thing recently in where the United States is working with Europe to develop sort of a consortium on steel and create incentives for steel companies and trade among the United States with the European Union for low carbon steel, and making that much more attractive by keeping by making that sort of a free trade opportunity. So it'll be interesting to see that happen as well, because what we've got right now is a linear economy where we take it out of the soil, virgin materials, renewables, etc. We make the product for single use and short lifespans, and we dispose of it in landfills and incineration. We've got to change that whole mindset. And here's some recommendations of how supply chain professionals can reduce greenhouse gases within their own supply chains. Number one, first, you need to know where you are. So you need to calculate your own carbon footprint in your organization. Number two, if you own your own fleet, or even if you don't, but you need to consider an electric or hybrid fleet operation for your trucks and automobiles. Improve your packaging. By improving your packaging and going to better packaging, less packaging, etc., you can not only save money, but you can save cube, and you can reduce your overall greenhouse gases. Consolidate your shipments. Don't send everything LTL if you can send it truckload. Don't send everything parcel if you can send it LTL. Shorten your supply chains. This is become a big thing now as we look at opportunities to move away from the manufacturing in China, and looking at other countries, and even bringing things back to Mexico, South America, Canada, etc., and regionalizing it. Consume less energy. There's a lot of opportunities to gauge your energy and reduce the cost of energy in your organization. Switch to renewable sources. Again, most warehouses have flat roofs. This might be a great opportunity to use solar power, etc. Utilize green building practices when you're building new facilities. Leverage digital transformation. As you move from a manual processes to digital processes, you speed up the opportunity, you use less paper, you use less resources. And incorporate circular economy concepts wherever you can. This is the opportunity, and this is an interesting concept that has grabbed hold in Europe and starting to grab hold in the United States, where you look at, if you look at things in terms of, is it biological or chemical, or is it technical? Are we manufacturing cars? Well, then you're on the technical side here. You can extend the life of a car, for example, by through regular maintenance, reusing products, remanufacturing, and ultimately recycling. I saw this as in a great opportunity when I was at New York City Transit, because the goal was to keep our buses and subway cars on the road. The more miles we put on them, the more we could extend the life of them. And what happened was, and we make sure that they were maintained properly. And at certain mileage, we would, for buses, for example, we would rebuild transmissions, and we would rebuild radiators, and those things, those remanufacturing processes, help to ultimately extend the life of a subway car or in a bus. They do this in airlines a lot now. They've been doing it with airlines for many years, and because the average life of an aircraft is 40 years. And the idea of it is to make sure that if it's properly maintained and properly manage the process, you can keep that airplane in the air and in use and generating profit for the organization. Do the same thing with automobiles, et cetera, and being able to switch things out and rebuild and extend the life of products. It even now is being used in the fashion industry. So it's an interesting concept completely as far as the circular economy. So let me leave you with some concepts here and some conclusions. There's an old saying. It's just sort of I believe this is Chinese in origin, Asian in origin. It's may you live in interesting times. And we're going to say this: the next decade is going to have its challenges in the supply chain profession, and supply chain people are going to be at the forefront of these changes. It's going to be a wild ride with promises prosperity for some and uncertainty for others. And we're going to see billions invested in ways to capture knowledge, train the workforce, manage risk, and digitize and decarbonize the planet and create circular economies. I think that there's one of the things that I think that has been the greatest asset of having supply chain professionals in organizations is their ability to come up with new ways of doing things, and just the innovation that supply chain managers bring to the table. There, at times some of us are going to think that it's going to be that these issues may be overwhelming, and a lot of times people work towards their own self-interest, but when faced with an intimate threat or an imminent threat, human beings show a capacity, an amazing capacity to unite for a common purpose. And measured by change, and this is measured by change that ultimately affects and benefits all stakeholders. The current war in the Ukraine, that's adding a lot of issues and further complicating what's going on. But I'll leave you with this, and this is from Robert Watson, who's an environmentalist, and it's one of my favorite quotes. And at times it inspires me, and at other times it scares the hell out of me. And that is, Mother Nature is just chemistry, biology, and physics. That's all she is. You cannot spin her. You cannot tell her that the oil companies say that climate change is a hoax. No, Mother Nature is going to do whatever chemistry, biology, and physics dictate. And Mother Nature always bats last and always bats 1,000.
Hey, that was a real incredible talk you gave there, Gary. But I can't help, I've come in contact with so many people who are anti-climate change. And you sit there, you give them facts and figures, they dispute them. And then we have our government, we have people in our government, I don't want to sound political, who follow that line of reasoning. And the scientists and the greatest minds that are out there, they can't seem to get that information out to everybody. Every once in a while you see some advertisement or something, somebody standing up for making sure we do climate change. And I'm just hoping maybe all the young people jump on board, because the baby boomers and some of the old timers, the people that I know, they're not buying it. And I want to tell them it's not for you. You're going to be dead maybe in the next 10, 15 years. Everybody else is going to have to deal with climate change. I tell people right now, the Arctic Circle, right? It's white from snow. The sun hits it, bounces off, right? So we lost something there, right?
Yeah.
And then as the temperature changes up there, and causes the the ice to melt. Now you have to understand what's under that ice is the most scariest part of climate change or global warming there is. That stuff is like 100 feet deep, miles and miles all across Canada and Siberia and everything else. And they have detritus that's been frozen for about 1 billion years. And once that stuff starts to rot, it's going to push out tons of methane, which is 12 times stronger than a carbon dioxide. And it's going to go into a runaway effect.
Mm-hmm.
And you say 2050, I'm worried about 2030. I mean, I don't know what's going on in these people's heads. Why are they listening to these far right crazy people who just spew stuff just to get a laugh or something?
Well, again, I'm
all right, that's it.
I'll we don't want to get into the politics of it. But,
I know nobody wants politics.
But the bottom line is, I mean, I wrote this for the supply chain people so that they could be looking at it and saying, how do we deal with this? In the ways that supply chain people can deal with it and improve their supply chains, because not only can they improve their supply chains, they can make them even more profitable. And I'll tell you what, it doesn't matter who it is, who it is, and as far as anybody talks about the fact that we can make more money doing it, as long as it does, we're gonna do it. And if it doesn't hurt the environment by, and we can still make money at it, then let's do it. It's kind of like just being able to somebody once told me, a guy I knew many years ago said, I believe in technology because I believe technology will solve all of man's problems. And it's because what happens, and because by making something more and more affordable, we can do it. The trick is now is that we still now have to realize that because of situations like COVID, et cetera, we need to change our business processes. And some of that, and you can still make you can still make money, you can still do things, but you have to be able to change your business processes, because that's what's happening. The world is changing and we've got to change with it. Just as an aside, I've got my email address on here. That's gasmith.cpim@gmail.com. If you want a copy of this, the article, I'll send you a PDF. Just send me an email and I'll send it out to you as soon as I can. And this is I also have, as I said, this is one of 3 articles that I've written for Supply Chain Management Review that deal with supply chains in a post-COVID world. So with that, I'll let people open the floor to questions and comments, and I don't know how much more time we've got.
As long as you want, but I was going to mention, thank you so much, Gary, a couple of things, and we'll take the questions in a sec. I did put the link for the CEU certificate, so if anybody needs that for certifications or for education of any kind or to show your boss, I went to this. The CEU certificate link is right in the chat window, as is the survey. We want to know what you think. You'd be rating us and the speaker and let us know what you think and what you would like to see maybe for topics in the future and stuff like that. Even though we're booked out a year, we're still planning for beyond a year, so that'll be pretty good. And then the last thing is this, like I said, this recording and the PowerPoint that Gary provided will be posted. The PowerPoint will be posted as a PDF, and the recording on our ASCM Massachusetts Minuteman website, of which you can get to easily. You can, the links for the certificate and all that, you can scroll around and see that too. So I think you'll like that. And Gary, we're going to be sending you a little token of our thanks. It'll come from Amazon. It's not spam, it's real. And it'll probably be from Sandeep Guar, who's our marketing person.
Okay.
With that, I'll let the questions come now. And if there are no questions, we can certainly stay on in networking. At that point, when the questions are done, I will shut off the recording.
Hey, Gary,
Yes.
I want to thank you for the little plug in the corner, the god Janus, that you had, the Roman god in the corner. The other thing I'll kind of mention is, when you kind of say where the world's heading. So one of your slides said, the job or position of cashier is going to be eliminated, which I agree. You walk in the grocery store and it's like very few lanes open. But the thing that amazes me is they probably have 20 or 30 people wandering the store picking, orders for people. But they're just going to drive to the curb and pick them up.
Mhm.
It's like, again, I don't necessarily think COVID drove it or so, but it's really tough to say where anything's heading,
Yeah, and this is, some of this is some of my thinking, some of it is, what's out there, I pull that in, whatever. But I think that, again, I go, some things, guesstimates and things about what's happening in the future are right on, and some are pure crap. I go back to when I was in college, and that was back in the 70s. So this is like 1976. I had a professor, finance professor, swear to everybody in the class that cash would be obsolete in 20 years. So that was 76. So by 96, I'm sorry, I hate to say it, but I use cash all the time. Everybody uses cash. I mean, yes, we're using more and more credit cards and debits and stuff like that. But, checking accounts, they said the checking accounts would be dead. People still write checks. The thing is that what we're doing is, there are some things that are going to happen and some things that won't. But I do believe that, one, we need to be we need to be adept at what's happening to the environment. I live on the coast, and we're hearing about losing our coastlines all the time now. But I also believe that change is happening faster and faster and faster, and that people have a hard enough time trying to keep up. I mean, we're change masters in supply chain. Our whole our lives are built around change, and yet we go to the grocery store and they've changed the color of the carton of Wheaties, and we can't find it, and we get frustrated. We hate change in some cases, but we deal with it all the time. And the thing is that we have to come up with some sort of a happy medium, but also be able to understand what can we change, how can we change it, and then get people to go along with us as well. And I think that's going to be one of the key things. And as the boomer generation leaves and all that knowledge leaves, we need to replace it with something, and that's going to be technology.
Hey, on this thing about change, is there anybody that's taken a listen? I can go back to the beginning of the Assyrians and Babylonians, but let's just go back to when we were in school, 1960s, like you said, till now, and rate the change of everything happening. And with this change of technology taking us off, are we seeing what's the positive spin on it and what's the negative spin? If it's moving ahead with all sorts of technology and putting us into a faster lane, is that improving us across the board and all that? Not just by making money, our health, like you said, climate, as well as where we are for the future. If all we ever do is automate like crazy, then there's nobody going to be working anymore to buying anything anybody was selling, So then we fall into an economic collapse. So I want to know if anybody's tracking that change and see the positive and the negatives. It's as if by pushing all the positives up and saying, okay, let's just keep doing that. All the negative stuff or stuff that, there's all sorts of science fiction out there. I was just thinking about David Bowie movie with The Man Who Fell from Earth, and Kurt Vonnegut is play a piano. I mean, there's so many works out there to talk about if we move too fast, it could hurt us.
Yeah. The one thing I see, and there was a presentation by Jenny Dearborn. She used to be Oracle's chief educational officer. So we kind of look back, and probably when I started in the workforce, the idea was you work, you're retired, and you kind of retired from that job for the rest of your life. And over the years, especially in supply chain, we saw how things changed. And all of a sudden, your job was very complex. You had to understand accounting. You had to understand all the principles and things that went into running a business versus your little silo. And the idea that if people continue with lifelong education as they do through Apex and different things, they're going to be contributors in that workforce. And it doesn't mean you're going to be the expert on artificial intelligence, but you're able to communicate to those people developing that technology so that you do end up with a useful product. But right now, like I said, you think back when you first started working and how much you've had to learn cross-cultural and all those things that came into play in the last 10 years or so. The whole evolution of like supply chain, and I'm sure most professions, it's all contributed to where we are.
Yeah, and I think I think you're right. But what I was wondering is, some of the younger people that are on, here tonight. What do you guys think? I mean, did anything that I say resonate with you, or basically, do you think I'm full of crap? I'm curious. I mean, I'm just because I've heard from Larry, and I've heard from John, I've heard from from Ken, but I haven't heard from some of the younger people out here, and I'm just curious.
They're very shy.
They're very shy.
Yeah.
No, I mean,
I think, I make a comment maybe, when you talked about the change going faster and faster, and people having more and more, harder time to adapt, maybe in some cases. I'm in my 40s, so I already feel that change. It's hard to keep up every day. I work for a technology company, and change is happening. I mean, we constantly have to reskill, constantly. But one thing we talk about also is mental health a lot. It's affecting a lot the younger generation. And part of it is technology. We're always on. We have flexibility, but you also required to be always on, kind of. You're always reachable. It's very hard to disconnect.
Right.
And even if we have all these changes, at the end of the day, people need to stay connected. It's just a human, we need connection. So computers are not going to solve everything. Anyway, that's just one token of that. And the other thing is, you mentioned something about the quarter to quarter. We just think long term, and profit has become the biggest measure. But we got to go back to thinking, okay, long term. When you were talking about companies before, thinking like a family, and I don't mean to say that, in the utopian way, but really we got big problems, the environment. I mean, if we don't have a planet, we're not going to have anything. So I think thinking long term and not having profit as the main measure for everything, because people are going to behave the way they're rewarded. So leadership, from people like you also, like you have experience, so like the older generation can give leadership, provide leadership. And so anyway, that's just some thoughts.
No, I think that's really good, Hamid. I think that I definitely, have I have some definite beliefs, but I as far as I believe that companies that think in terms of the long term are the ones that are going to be around, for a long time. An interesting fact. Of the companies that were on the Fortune 500 in 1955, anybody want to make a guess as to how many of those companies are still around today? Okay, 500 companies. So you know that there were 500 companies in 1955.
25.
There's exactly, well, let's see, I think there's 60.
6.
So it's like 12% of the companies that were in these, again, the American companies. There were great companies. Some of them are still around. General Motors is still there, et cetera, et cetera. But, and, some have grown into it, but only 12%, and that's less than, that's what's the less than a lifetime of a person. And, I believe that one of the keys to longevity in the corporate world and et cetera is the ability to adapt. And if companies can adapt as they grow and yet still stay true to their
Core.
their core, still to stay true to their core.
There's
They will
chicken,
be
sweet
around.
potatoes, and veggies on the stove.
Exactly. And so
That's for me.
But my point being is that
Yep.
companies will be around for a long time, and so we'll as things change, things will we'll still be able to see organizations like General Motors or like whether the good, bad, or indifferent, but companies that actually care about people, I guess, is my key. But anyway,
I'm seeing the adaptation you talk about is key. I see that. And it's survival of the fittest. And I always say capitalism is the natural order reflection of the capital of survival of the fittest. It fits all the design features of how, in order to defy capitalism, is to adapt. If you don't, you will be swallowed up by capitalism. So the name of the game here is seeking to find that path and how to adapt, and always know where you must stand. I don't know, it just takes some great minds who are ahead of any company to see that, and they know they have to move ahead.
Yeah, well, in the first article that I wrote for Supply Chain Management Review after the dust settles, I talk about the ability, as I said, adapting, but adapting is made up of two things. One is resilience, and the other is agility. Resilience is the ability to actually take a shock, and take a disruption and absorb that disruption. And agility is then the ability to pivot and come up with a reaction to that. So in other words, that might be a new process, a new market, a new product, etc. But the idea is that in order to adapt, you have to be able to be resilient, and you have to be able to pivot. So, but yeah, any other quick comments or anything like that? And again, be happy to, and anybody who wants to send me an email or just chat, feel free to, or, I'm also on LinkedIn. So if you want to connect with me, feel free to do that as well.
Great stuff. I will stop the recording in case anyone wants to, do informal networking. That's fine. We can chat for a few, no problems.